Okay, picture this. Florence, February 1497. You're in the heart of the Renaissance, right? A time we think of as all about humanism, beauty, rediscovery.
Peak Renaissance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But instead, in the main square, the Piazza della Signoria, there's this huge roaring bonfire. And it's not some accidental blaze.
No, far from it.
People are bringing their treasures, mirrors, fancy clothes, books, art, even musical instruments, and throwing them into the flames. Sometimes willingly, sometimes, well, let's just say encouraged.
Strongly encouraged, yes.
Yeah.
By young men with cross-shaped sticks watching closely.
It's this massive planned event, a kind of spiritual cleansing, but incredibly dramatic.
It really was.
So today we're diving deep into this famous and often pretty misunderstood event, the Bonfire of the Vanities, the Falò delle Vanità.
That phrase itself just conjures up so much, doesn't it? Religious fervor versus art, progress versus piety.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And we're focusing on that most notorious one, February 7th, 1497, Shrove Tuesday.
Right, the big one in Florence.
Yeah.
Driven by the followers of this Dominican friar, Girolamo Savonarola, they were systematically collecting and burning thousands of objects they considered occasions of sin.
So our mission today is to really unpack the sources here. Who was this friar who could command people to burn art? What exactly counted as vanity? Was it just fancy clothes?
Much broader than that.
And why does this specific bonfire still echo so strongly today? You know, why is it the go-to metaphor for ideological purges?
That's the core question, really. And just for context, up front, while 1497 is the famous one, it wasn't totally out of the blue.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the sources tell us similar bonfires, maybe smaller scale, had happened before, often connected with the sermons of another figure, San Bernardino di Siena, earlier in the 15th century.
Okay, so it was a known tactic, maybe, an extreme form of penance.
Kind of, yeah, an established, if pretty radical method of pushing for moral reform.
But if it wasn't entirely new, why did this Florentine fire become the Bonfire of the Vanities? What made it stick in history? Was it just Savonarola himself, or was Florence in the 1490s just ready for something like this?
I think it's a mix of both, but honestly, the sheer force of personality and crucially the power wielded by the central figure here, Girolamo Savonarola, is undeniable.
He's the key.
He's absolutely central. He basically turned this occasional religious act into a sustained political tool, a mandate almost.
What's wild is how he even got there. He wasn't some outsider who storms the city gates.
Right,
Yeah.
not at all. Get this, Savonarola was actually assigned to Florence in 1490. And guess who requested him?
Go on.
Lorenzo de' Medici. Lorenzo the Magnificent. The city's leader, the great patron of the arts.
Wait, Lorenzo invited the guy who would later orchestrate the burning of art and luxuries.
He did. Maybe he thought bringing in a famously pious friar would add some, spiritual legitimacy to his family's rule. A bit of moral cover, perhaps?
Wow. Talk about unintended consequences.
Oh, completely. It backfired spectacularly. Within just a few years, Savonarola went from Medici appointee to their most vocal, most dangerous enemy.
Through his preaching.
Exactly. Fiery sermons predicting doom for Florence because of its logery, its perceived moral corruption, and his words had power. He played a huge role in whipping up sentiment against the Medici.
Which led to their downfall.
He was instrumental in their overthrow and exile in 1494.
And then what? He takes over.
Pretty much. He stepped right into that power vacuum. His influence just exploded. He became the effective ruler of Florence.
Not officially, though. Like, he wasn't the Duke or anything.
Oh, no official title. But his religious authority translated directly into political control. He could sway the government, dictate policy. He rallied people against any kind of luxury, seeing all those Renaissance excesses as just moral rot.
And he needed protection. You mentioned soldiers.
Yeah, he had a personal guard. That tells you something, right? A friar needing soldiers. That's an incredible amount of secular power for a man of the cloth.
Yeah.
Almost unprecedented.
Okay, so a friar, basically running Florence with his own security detail, preaching against the very foundations of the Renaissance. That context makes the bonfires seem less random, I guess.
It makes them seem almost inevitable, in a way, especially the big ones during Carnival in 1497 and 1498.
Right. Let's get into the specifics then. What exactly was on this inventory of sin? Because that really reveals his whole agenda, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The targets show it was a direct assault on the material culture, the whole mindset of the Renaissance, anything that might tempt someone to sin, basically.
Okay, so what are we talking about? I've heard mirrors were a big one.
Oh, yes. Vanity items were category 1. Mirrors, definitely. But also cosmetics, fine dresses, elaborate hairstyles, wigs, anything seen as promoting personal pride or vanity.
Makes sense, in a grim sort of way.
What else? Then you have things considered frivolous distractions, basically entertainment.
Like what, gambling?
Yeah, playing cards, games, dice, but also, and this surprises some people, musical instruments.
Instruments, like lutes and things.
Yeah.
Why?
And the manuscripts for secular songs. The idea was any pleasure, any time spent not focused directly on God was wasted. Or worse, potentially sinful. It distracted you from salvation.
Wow. Okay, vanity items, entertainment. What else? Books.
Absolutely, this is crucial. Literature. Specifically, books deemed immoral. The sources point directly to works by Boccaccio.
Boccaccio, author of the Decameron, full of fairly earthy secular stories.
Exactly. Burning Boccaccio wasn't just about getting rid of dirty books. It was an attack on the rediscovery of classical, worldly humanism that Boccaccio represented.
So it's an intellectual purge, too, not just moral.
Precisely. It was targeting the very philosophical shift that defined the previous century of the Renaissance. It was saying this whole direction is wrong.
And then, of course, the art itself.
Yes. Paintings and sculptures, especially anything featuring nudes or celebrating pagan classical themes.
Do we know how much was lost?
Yeah.
Specific pieces?
It's hard to quantify the total loss. Some later accounts mention things like several antique statues, but specifics are scarce. The focus, though, was clear. Celebrating the human body, celebrating pre-Christian stories that was seen as idolatry. Unacceptable.
And how did they collect all this stuff? Did people just hand it over?
Some did, caught up in the religious fervor, but Savonarola had organized teams, often young men, acting as his enforcers. They went door to door, sometimes using pressure, sometimes outright force, to compel people to give up their vanities.
So not entirely voluntary. These were his supporters.
Yes, they became known as the piagnoni, which means weepers.
Weepers, like they were crying over the city's sins.
Exactly. Apparently, it started as an insult hurled at them, but they embraced it. Turned it into a badge of honor, signifying their moral seriousness.
So it's popular religious fervor, yes, but channeled through this organized, state-sanctioned coercion. That's a potent mix.
A very potent mix. Which brings us neatly to probably the most famous story connected to all this.
Let me guess. Botticelli.
Botticelli. The enduring anecdote that the great artist himself, Sandro Botticelli, threw some of his own mythological paintings onto the fire. Maybe even masterpieces like The Birth of Venus.
It's such a powerful image, isn't it?
Yeah.
The creator destroying his own creations out of piety. But is it actually true? What do the contemporary sources say?
Well, when you dig into the primary accounts, the story gets shaky. The main source we have on Botticelli's life from relatively close to the period is Giorgio Vasari's biography.
Written a bit later, but still foundational.
Right. And Vasari, well, he doesn't mention Botticelli burning his paintings
Yeah.
at all.
Really? So where does the story come from?
It seems to be a later embellishment, something added, perhaps, to make the whole narrative even more dramatic, the ultimate conflict between art and faith embodied in one artist.
Okay, so if Botticelli probably didn't burn his own work, what was the impact of Savonarola on him? Because Vasari did say something about that, didn't he?
He did. Vasari claimed that Botticelli fell so heavily under Savonarola's influence that he basically stopped painting altogether. That he became creatively paralyzed, producing nothing significant after becoming a follower.
Is that true?
Modern art historians generally don't accept that claim either.
Oh, why not?
Because we have paintings by Botticelli that are pretty reliably dated to after Savonarola was executed in 1498. So he clearly didn't just stop painting.
So Vasari wasn't entirely accurate, maybe?
It seems not on that specific point. What is likely true, though, is that Savonarola profoundly redirected Botticelli's art.
How so?
Well, look at a painting like the Mystical Nativity. It's dated around 1500. Art historian Rab Hatfield makes a strong case connecting its very intense kind of apocalyptic religious symbolism directly to a specific sermon Savonarola gave back in 1493.
So less pagan mythology, more intense Christian themes.
Exactly. The painting is full of complex Christian allegory, angels, demons being cast down. It's a world away from the serene humanism of his earlier mythological works. The style is still Botticelli, but the subject matter, the feeling, is deeply influenced by Savonarola's worldview.
That's actually a much more interesting, nuanced story than just artist burns paintings.
It is. It shows influence, a shift in focus, maybe even conviction, not necessarily destruction. Botticelli didn't destroy his past work. He channeled his talent into reflecting the intense spiritual climate Savonarola had created.
So the fire didn't end his career, it just changed its course.
Precisely. It highlights this complex ideological struggle happening, not just a sort of mindless mob action, but, as you might expect, Savonarola's fiery reign couldn't last.
Right. You can't challenge the status quo that dramatically without pushback, especially not the Renaissance elite and, I assume, the church itself.
Exactly. His moral pronouncements were one thing, but his growing political power in Florence and his increasingly bold calls for church reform, that got the attention of Pope Alexander VI in Rome.
Pope Alexander VI, the Borgia Pope, not someone you wanted as an enemy.
Definitely not. The Pope saw Savonarola as a direct threat, politically disruptive and spiritually questionable, especially with his prophecies and claims of divine inspiration.
So the hammer came down.
Swiftly and decisively. Savonarola was excommunicated on May 13, 1497. Then he was formally charged with heresy and sedition.
And this leads to that incredible historical irony, doesn't it?
It really is. It's almost too neat for history, but it's true. The man who orchestrated the Bonfire of the Vanities met a very similar fate.
How did it happen?
Less than a year after his excommunication, on May 23, 1498, Savonarola and two of his main followers were executed. They were hanged first.
Okay.
And then their bodies were burned publicly.
And a location, don't tell me.
The exact same spot where he'd held his own bonfires, the Piazza della Signoria.
Wow. The symbolism is just staggering. The purifier consumed by fire in the very place he tried to purify.
The crowds who had cheered the burning of Vanities now watched the burning of the friar, a complete reversal.
And was that the end of it? Was his influence just erased?
Well, the papal authorities certainly tried to make sure it was. There was one final act of censorship.
What was that?
They issued a decree. Anyone who owned any of Savonarola's writings, his sermons, treatises, prophecies, had just 4 days to turn them over to be destroyed.
4 days. That's incredibly fast.
Designed to be thorough and swift. And the penalty for holding on to his works.
Let me guess. Excommunication.
You got it. The same tool used against Savonarola himself. They were determined to wipe his ideas, his influence, off the map. The fire used to erase the memory of the man who had used fire to erase vanity.
That whole cycle is just incredible. The burning, the counter-burning.
And that cyclical nature, one ideology burning the symbols of the last, only to be overturned and its own symbols burned. That's partly why this whole episode resonates so strongly, I think. It becomes a kind of historical template for these culture clashes.
Absolutely. It's clearly way more than just a historical footnote. I mean, the phrase itself, Bonfire of the Vanities, is everywhere. It's completely entered the language as a metaphor.
It really has. It stands for that moment when moral fervor, or perhaps hypocrisy, targets cultural expression or material wealth. The sources show just how pervasive it became.
The most obvious example has to be Tom Wolfe, right?
That's for sure. His 1987 novel, The Bonfire of the Vanities, and the movie adaptation, he deliberately used that historical resonance. He took the name and the ritual and applied it to the excesses and moral failings of 1980s New York finance and society. That book really cemented the phrase in modern consciousness.
And you see echoes in other places, too.
Oh, yeah. Loads of historical fiction taps into it. George Eliot's Romola, back in 1863, deals with Savonarola's Florence. Irving Stone's The Agony and the Ecstasy about Michelangelo touches on it. Even Anne Rice in The Vampire Armand. It's a dramatic backdrop.
And it's visually powerful, so it makes sense it would show up in games and TV, too.
Definitely. For gamers, Assassin's Creed 2 Second actually features Savonarola as an antagonist, and you witness the bonfire event.
Right. I remember that.
And the Netflix series Medici, in its final season, dedicates quite a bit of time to Savonarola's rise and fall, culminating in the bonfire and his execution. Season 3, final episode, The Fate of the City, covers it.
So it keeps getting retold, reinterpreted. Its power as a symbol endures.
Absolutely.
Okay, so just to recap our deep dive then. We've gone beyond just the image of the fire itself. We looked at the political situation in Florence, how Savonarola rose to power.
Right, filling that Medici vacuum.
We examined that fascinating, kind of terrifying list of things, considered vanities, mirrors, music, Boccaccio showing the breadth of his anti-Renaissance agenda.
The intellectual dimension, too.
And we untangled that whole Botticelli question, not destroying his work, perhaps, but definitely having his artistic direction changed by Savonarola's influence.
A crucial distinction.
And finally, the ironic end, his own execution by fire and the attempts to erase his legacy.
So I think the key takeaway for you listening is this. The historical bonfire, the Vanities, wasn't just some random outburst of medieval fanaticism lingering in the Renaissance.
Right.
It was maybe the most vivid, concentrated example of how intense religious or moral zeal, when combined with political power, can dictate everything. Not just laws, but what art is acceptable, what books you can read, what you can own, even the value of your personal belongings.
It's a stark reminder, really.
It is a sharp reminder of these cycles we see in history: creation, then destruction driven by ideology, then sometimes another backlash. It shows how fragile cultural achievements can be when a powerful moral authority decides they are vain or sinful.
And thinking about those piagnones, the weepers, and how, according to sources like Guicciardini, they were actively forcing people to comply. That brings up a final thought for you to chew on. Considering that element of coercion, what might be the modern vanities? What things today, maybe digital things, cultural trends, forms of entertainment, even ways of thinking might a powerful moral authority, if one arose, demand we throw into a symbolic fire? What would be on that pyre?